Hello everyone, hope you all are doing fine. This is Gautam from Shailaja AS, and in this video we'll briefly look into the new GDP series that was released in February 2026 by your Union Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation through National Statistics Office organization. In this video, what we'll look into is the changes that has been brought in the new GDP series, and we'll try and understand the positive implications and the negative or the concerns associated with the new GDP series. But before we start into the actual changes that were introduced in the new GDP series, we'll first try and have a quick recap on what do you mean by GDP at a more basic or fundamental level, right? See, GDP is nothing but your gross domestic product, which is the total value of all the final goods produced in the country in 1 year. Okay, so that is total value of all final goods and services. This final is important. Goods and services produced in a country in 1 year. Okay, so what do you mean by total value? Means there is a monetary or the price associated with it of all the final goods and services is nothing but the volume part of it, right? So that is going to give you a total GDP. For very simple terms, let us imagine for 2020 the volume of the total goods and services produced in the country, let us take a very simplified unit as 10 units. And let us take, for our very simplified basic understanding, the price of 1 unit, let us all bring it down to one nominal level as 10 rupees. Okay, so that equivalents to 100 rupees. So the total value of all the final goods and services produced in the country in the year 2020 was 100 rupees. 10 rupees per unit. Okay, this is 10 rupees per unit. This is total units. I am telling you at a very basic fundamental level just to try and understand the concept, right? So 2020, this is price and this is volume. If it is 10 rupees per unit and volume is 10, it is going to give you 100 as the total number. Suppose in 2021, the volume of the goods and services produced in the country is going to increase because of increased workforce coming into economy, or because of increased productivity, where the same machines are giving you multiple outputs. So for multiple reasons, your volume can increase, or there is increased investment, there is increased demand, both in the domestic as well as at the international era, right? And if the prices may also increase to a certain extent because of inflation. Inflation is nothing but general rise in price of goods and services in the country. See, whatever was the price of, for example, rice 30 years ago, and now it is going to be drastically different. Forget about rice. The petrol, 10 years back, the price of petrol per liter was around 70 rupees. Now it is 100 rupees. So in an economy, there is a general rise in price of goods and services, which is called as your inflation. Okay. So suppose there is a increase in price. So 12 into 12, it is going to become 144. This is called as your nominal GDP. In the sense, it is accounting for the current year market price, But in order to get a more accurate picture, it is always better, for example, it is always better to keep the price fixed at one particular base year. Okay. For example, I'll tell you, in 2022, the pricing of goods can come to around 9 units. The actual amount of goods and services produced in an economy can decrease. The volume or the quantity of it can decrease. But the price has increased due to various reasons. The price might have gone till 15. So 15 into 9, it is going to become 135. So compared to 2020, if you look at only the total value, this is the GDP, if you look at only the total value, 100 rupees and 135 rupees, definitely we can say our economy is growing. But is it really the true picture? No, certainly not. So as a result, in order to overcome this dilemma, economists or policymakers felt that it is good for comparative purposes, for analysis purposes, if we can arrive at one base year. Okay, in order to get a more accurate picture, if you look at the total value, the GDP has increased. But that increase is not coming because of increase in the volume of goods and services. That increase is coming from your increase in prices, which is not a more accurate picture of the economic condition in the country. So as a result, people started saying that, okay, let this be a nominal GDP, which we are calculating on the market price. We'll arrive at something called as your real GDP by accounting for inflation, or in other words, by keeping the prices fixed to the base year. Let us consider this as your base year. We are going to calculate the value using this price. So as a result, for 2021, 10 into 12, it becomes 120. 10 into 9, it becomes 90. This is your real GDP, whereby you are keeping the prices fixed to a base year. As a result, you are going to get more accurate understanding of the growth of an economy itself, because you can see in 2021 it has actually grown by 20%, but in 2022 it is giving us a more accurate picture because the volume has reduced, but the price, we are keeping it as the base price year of 2020 itself. So we can clearly see in 2020 the actual GDP has gone down. Okay, so when you look at the nominal GDP, the GDP has increased. When you look at the real GDP, whereby you are keeping the prices constant at the base year, in other words, you are accounting for inflation. This is called as your real GDP. It gives you a more accurate picture of what is the exact situation in our country. So whenever you come across terms that GDP is growing at 7%, 8%, that is with regard to the real GDP, where we are keeping the prices fixed to something called as a base year. We have kept 2020 as the base year for the calculation purposes in this context, for this example. Now, until now, what was happening is that we had kept the base year as 2011-12. And whatever GDP calculations that we are having from 2012-13, 13-14, 14-15, and until 2024-2025 or 2025-2026, all this at the base year of 2011 and 12. In a sense, the prices were relating to this particular year. Okay, so whatever was the change in the volume of goods, we used to multiply it with the prices of the base year, and then we used to get the more accurate value of the GDP. Okay, so this basic understanding is necessary for us in order to understand what are the changes that has been brought in the new GDP series. Okay, in the new GDP series, what we can clearly see is that the base year has moved from 2011-12 to 2022-23, because it is not making good sense that we compare the prices to almost 1.5 decades back. It is necessary to move the base year periodically in order to get a more accurate understanding of the economy. Is that fine? So this is a very logical step. After 10 years, again, they are going to move your base year. Okay, so base year has been improved from 2011-12, or it has moved from 2011 to 2022-2023. That's the first important point. Second point, whenever you are calculating even the prices, in order to account for the inflation, in order to account for the price rises, they are going to use something called as your deflator. Okay, and in this context, the deflator was only used for the final goods and services. But in the new GDP series, they have realized that we need to also use a deflator for your intermediate goods and services also. So it is going to get a more accurate picture of the economic performance of the country. Okay, so these two will not, too much of a technical details of deflator is not required. All you need to understand that there is a more accurate, you can say, understanding of the price of the goods and services produced in the country. Okay, because they are accounting for inflation not only at the final level but also at a intermediate level. Another changes which they have brought in is that the GST data, which is rich data about the consumption patterns or the consumption trends in an economy, okay, about what sort of goods and services are being consumed in economy, all of this is going in real time. And in trying to estimate your GDP, this GST data is also now being integrated. That gives a more accurate picture of how many, the volume of goods and services produced, and also about the price levels, right? Another important aspect is the data collection sources, and the process or the methodology to collect the data sources has been improvised compared to the previous models. Earlier, they used to collect only from a sample size and they used to extrapolate it. Now, they are trying to go for a more comprehensive data source called as a periodic labor force survey and annual survey of unincorporated sector enterprises. So earlier, they used to, again, as I told you, they used to take a sample of each sector or each industry and they used to extrapolate it to the entire industries. For example, if you talk about textile manufacturing, if they want to understand in textile industry what has been the performance of the industry at a economic or at a national level, they used to take sample from maybe a few textile units, then they used to extrapolate it. But now they are going for a more accurate, you can say, collection of the data sources itself. The same goes for your private consumption expenditure, right? As I told you, they're trying to increase the sources itself, because a large part of our economy is not under a formal banking system. A large part of an economy still tries to deal with the cash. Obviously, that has changed now with the introduction of your UPI. So we have a better financial data of the economic activities in our country. Even otherwise, fields like real estate, fields like agriculture are still considered largely informal in the nature, which is functioning outside your banking system, which is functioning outside your formal financial system. So in order to get a more accurate picture of what is exactly happening in the informal sector, they have tried to diversify the sources. They have tried to get into more sources to collect the data, and they have also improvised upon the methodology of processing this data and extrapolating this data. So this is more of a statistical improvement over a period of time. For us as a general students, what is more important? First thing, the base year has increased. Second thing, GDP deflator is now being applicable even at the intermediate level. That gives you a more accurate picture of the economic activities in our country. Third thing is that the sources and the process has made an improvement compared to the traditional methods. Okay. So the positive impact of it obviously is that if you have a better sources, if you are having an updated base year, and if you are accounting for your inflation at a more in-depth level, obviously you're going to get a more accurate picture of your GDP. Okay. And once you have a more accurate economic picture, you will be in a better position to formulate your policies. So you will understand exactly what needs to be tweaked, whether we need to go for policy rate increase or policy rate decrease, whether our economy is really functioning in the intended manner or not. So that is one advantage. Another important aspect of the positive outcome is the informal sector is now getting better visibility and better understanding. Like what exactly is happening at an informal sector level. Because of increased data collection and better processes, the visibility of informal sector has increased, right? Now coming to the negative aspect of it, once there is a more accurate representation of the economic data, they have now seen that there has been a reduction in the total economic size of a country when we are getting more accurate data sources. Earlier, we are using more extrapolation and we are using more guessing part of it. Now, with better data accumulation, it has now they have now come to a conclusion that the actual GDP for 2025 and 2026 is 3.3% lower than your earlier estimates. Now, what is going to happen when the total GDP is going to come down? There are going to be multiple implications. The first thing is, see, for example, earlier it was considered as 100, but now if you have gone for a better interpretation of an economy through new GDP series, they have estimated it is 3.3% smaller. So let us consider it is now as 97. Now what is going to happen because of this? First thing, our target was $5 trillion economy. So suppose this is one particular target. This has now become much more farther. Okay, so to achieve a $5 trillion economic size, it is now becoming much more harder because your actual size is actually less. Earlier, suppose if you have to travel from 100 to 150, now you have to travel from 97 to 150. So the path has become much more longer and the path has become much more harder, is one of the implications of this new GDP series. Second thing, your fiscal deficit is always calculated as a percentage of your GDP. Okay, it is actually your total borrowings as a percentage of your GDP. Now, what happens if the GDP decreases? If the denominator decreases, your fiscal deficit is going to increase. Okay, so for the same amount of borrowings, just because your GDP has now gone down, your fiscal deficit is increasing. For example, earlier, let us just take for an example, they were borrowing 50 rupees and the total GDP was around 150. So the fiscal deficit, you can say it was around 33% or 15, okay, 33%. Just for an example, for a representative purposes, I am just saying you, just understand how it is functioning at a mathematical level. Now what is happening, the GDP itself has come down. For example, let us say it has come down to 100. Same borrowings, they are still borrowing 50 only. But now the deficit ratio is going to increase because of lower denominator. It is now going to shoot up to 50%. So your fiscal deficit ratio is going to increase, and whatever was the target that was meant to be achieved for fiscal deficit is also going to get harder, because right now fiscal deficit is around 4.7%. Our target is come down to 3%. Now, because of decrease in GDP size due to new GDP series, 4.7% for the same borrowings, it is now appearing as 4.8%. So as a result, the target of achieving fiscal deficit is going to become much more harder. Okay, so this basic mathematical understanding is enough because it can be asked in your prelims question as well. Like what would happen if the new GDP series is estimated to be 3.3% than your earlier targets? They can give you an option. Fiscal deficit is going to become much more easier, or fiscal deficit target is going to become much harder. Which of this is the correct option? Right? So you need to understand what is happening at a more macroeconomic level with regard to macroeconomic targets. What will happen to your $5 trillion target, and what is going to happen to your fiscal deficit targets. Right? Both of them are going to get much more harder. Right? And one of the other important aspect, as I already told you, is the debt sustainability. So overall debt is also all calculated as a part of your GDP. So that ratio is also going to increase. So whatever is your target is also going to become much more harder. Now, the major aspect or the political implications of this GDP is your center and state financial relations. Now, all your central transfers or grants or your devolution formulas always used to peg it or always used to link it to your GDP ratios. So now that the GDP is going to be slightly altered, this particular grants or devolutions or transfers is also going to get altered. So states now have to enter into a renegotiation in order to get, we can say, a better transfers from the central government, right? So this is at a political level. They have to renegotiate the central transfers to the state, because all the central transfers are linked to your GDP ratios, right? So this is all about this particular issue. I hope you have got a fair bit of an idea on it. Let us look into one of the questions. India's periodic revision of GDP base year is not merely a statistical exercise, but a fundamental prerequisite for a sound economic governance. So they're saying that we need to keep updating our GDP base years because it is one of the sound economic governance principle. Examine this statement in the context of recently released GDP series. So you tell me the merits of updating the base years, and you tell me some of the concerns associated with it. So it's a 10-marker question. If you're able to attempt it, please write your answers, and you can send it to me on my WhatsApp or Telegram number, or you can email it to me on my email ID. All the very best.